Okay.
Well, welcome aboard to episode 17 of the Impact Narrative.
The good ship Impact Narrative.
As it steers its way through the rocks of contemporary politics, culture,
The rocks,
sports.
I've gone for choppy waters myself, but either way I think it works nicely.
Rocks.
Rocks,
Yeah.
right.
Good, and at least we're not using the iceberg cliche. That's...
We're not.
No, it's a secondary cliche. Rocks is still a cliche, but
Suggests
it's...
that we've run aground.
Yeah, something like that. But whereas the programme, of course, is steaming ahead.
Yes, indeed. Indeed. So, we've got a jam-packed show, Mark, but there's a lot to cover.
There is. Too much.
Well,
So we'll run
possibly.
out of time.
So, Ireland, Brexit, Colombia,
Arsenal.
Amazon,
Right.
Brexit,
Wow. But Brexit twice.
Trump,
Yeah.
Brexit,
Trump, yeah. North Korea.
Trump.
Arsenal.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So, lots to talk about, but also, in exciting news, we have a special guest.
We haven't.
We do.
Not the one that we've been trying to get for years.
No,
No. Okay. So not McLeod.
not today.
No. Okay.
Next
But
week, maybe.
not our John Stuart Mill correspondent, who's
Indeed.
we haven't mentioned for ages. But
But now we have.
now we have. But we have managed
Are
to.
there John Stuart Mill news? Is there any?
John Stuart Mill, no, but well, it's certainly our colleague Dr. McLeod has obviously profited from his association with
Obviously.
the late
We should say
lamented.
no more.
We shouldn't. Good. So, who is this special guest star, Simon?
Well, I think we should just show him. So, cue the music.
Yeah, so the mystery is resolved. Although Meghan Markle was desperate to appear, we felt that really this time we should go for somebody, a slightly more niche celebrity in the form of our colleague who has been brought here at our own expense, really.
He really has. It's very, very damaging to our pockets.
Yes, indeed. Dr. Brian Garvey, welcome from this very parish of
Indeed.
PPR. And
Of the second P.
The second P, philosophy, yeah.
And
PF orbit.
And Dr. Garvey has views on many matters, and no doubt we're going to include him, especially football. He's particularly keen on Arsenal Football Club.
He's got a lot of thoughts on the new Arsenal manager.
Yeah. Oh, well, is there a new Arsenal manager?
There is.
Ah, that's nice.
But we'll save that for later on, I think.
Okay.
So, obviously, Brian, we asked you to come on today to talk a little bit about events in Ireland and what's going on today. There's a referendum to repeal the 8th. So, those people aren't aware of what's happening today. Could you just tell us a little bit about it,
well,
and then
like everything in Irish history, you have to go back a long way to know what it's about. So the abortion issue has been a very kind of controversial issue in Ireland for a long time. I think probably in most countries in Western Europe now it's been resolved, but in Ireland it still hasn't. And I guess that's partly because of the kind of religious influence and so forth.
Sure.
So there's been a number of referendums about it. Like the last ones were in the 1980s. I think the last one was probably the first thing I ever voted in when I was 18. And it was like
Wow.
About 1986.
1880 was this.
Yeah. Anyway, so the 8th Amendment is in the Irish Constitution. Unlike the UK, Ireland has a written constitution which constrains what Parliament can do, so what laws Parliament can pass and so forth. And currently the 8th Amendment, which was inserted into the Constitution in 1983 as a result of a referendum back then, it states that the unborn, well, it says unborn child, like fetus, embryo, whatever you want to say, has an equal right to life with the mother.
Sure.
So in practice, it means it basically rules out abortion, even in quite extreme circumstances. But there was a controversial case a couple of years ago where technically, legally, the hospital could have intervened and aborted and saved the mother's life, but they chose not to. Because of a kind of conscience thing, you know.
Right.
Anyway, so that was very controversial, and the mother died, and it became a big rallying point for people who were pro-choice. So at the moment, the government, and with the backing of some of the minority parties as well, have legislation proposed which would introduce abortion in some circumstances. So it would be up to 12 weeks would be permitted, regardless of circumstances. Also in medical circumstances it would be permitted. So many people see this as long overdue.
And this is paid for by the state?
It's the first medical. I mean, the National Health Service equivalent in Ireland is quite poor, really. So it could be paid by the state, but it wouldn't necessarily be.
Okay. That's a debate for another show.
That is a debate for another show. Nearly everybody in Ireland has sort of private healthcare, and it's kind of like it's reasonably affordable private healthcare. Right. And that's a different issue. So in some ways, the Irish proposal is more liberal than what Britain has, because there isn't this kind of pretense that it has to be a medical reason that there is here. But on the other hand, it's only up to 12 weeks that will be the case. So I don't know if that way it's going to less liberal. Now, the way it works is that in order to pass that legislation, the first obstacle is to repeal the 8th Amendment, which the referendum is about today. And then the government would have to actually, Parliament would have to actually pass this legislation. So there's kind of two obstacles to get passed, and this is just the first one. So I've been following this discussion. I'm pro-choice myself, and I would vote yes if I could. But if I left the country too, I'm not eligible to vote in Ireland anymore. And it's very hard to call how it will go. A couple of years ago, I think was it last year or the year before, Ireland, I think, surprised a lot of people. We had a referendum on legalising same-sex marriage, and that passed by quite a convincing majority, and I think that surprised lots of people. So that might suggest then that this will pass as well. But there is this worry, and I've seen some Irish commentators, like the novelist Pat McCabe, he commented on this in The Observer a few weeks ago, that there could be like a kind of Brexit factor here, or a Trump factor, that there is this kind of mindset that you get sometimes, which obviously exists here as well. Like, we're not going to let that kind of liberal, overeducated, snobby elite tell us what to do. In Ireland, it has the extra twist that the liberal, overeducated, snobby elite who supposedly tell us what to do are also pro-British and traitors and blah blah blah. So there is a worry that kind of side of things could come out, and a related worry to that. And from what I've seen of the debates, this hasn't happened too much. That just as some people on the kind of Brexit side here thought that the Remain side were kind of patronising and so on, there's a worry that people on the pro-choice side might come across kind of patronising, and given that there's a lot of undecided people. So and I think on the whole that hasn't happened. On the whole, the debate's been reasonably temperate and civilised.
And has it been a good quality debate?
There's been some awful crap. There's always some awful crap on Twitter.
Sure.
I saw. This is public knowledge. So an Irish journalist called David Quinn, he writes in the Irish version of the Sunday Times as well as in various Irish papers, and he's headed this thing called the Iona Institute, which is a Catholic kind of lobbying group. And he tweeted, he withdrew the tweet, but it's out there now. He claimed that the repealing the 8th Amendment was an attack on property rights. I really don't see this at all. And he claimed that the government, that straight after repeal, the government were going to nationalise half the houses in the country. And this is, he must have been drunk or something. I mean, he withdrew it straight away.
This programme, he isn't here to defend himself from the allegation of...
But he did say that, but not that he was drunk, but he did say that. Anyway, for the most part, the debate's been reasonably balanced and civilised. There's a lot of undecideds, so the worry is still there. I won't be counting any chickens until the result. Like they start counting the results tomorrow, so I won't make any assumptions as to what the results will be. And there's also the factor that even if the yes side wins, the government will still have to legislate. Like imagine if it turns out to be a very close result. You can imagine a lot of politicians would say, "Oh, okay, we don't want to annoy too many people."
So on that point, Brian, I've got just two questions. I'm conscious that you've got to dash off, and the questions are: how does this issue map onto the current political spectrum? And the second one is: there's been talk of the government legislating already and putting in constitutional decrees as to what will happen if the 8th is repealed.
Well, they've put there is a document, a proposed legislation, which is on the Ministry of Health website. It's basically the Minister of Health who's been responsible for this. Some of the things that he's proposed have already been rejected. So, for example, he wants to put an extra kind of double lock on it to kind of prevent kind of backsliding. Or indeed forward sliding, I suppose.
Sliding generally.
Yeah, because he wants to put in this thing that it would have to have a supermajority to change this legislation. That was rejected as being just unconstitutional. So far, there is just proposed legislation, and it hasn't actually been debated or discussed in in
Right.
the Dáil.
Yeah.
So the answer to that is there is proposed legislation there.
Yeah.
It's a 12-week thing and so on. But it's hard to know what would happen in light of, just like with Brexit.
Sure.
We don't know what kind of Brexit we're going to get.
And that would have to go through parliamentary structures.
Yeah.
And then where does this leave us then? Where does this issue map onto Parliament and the political spectrum?
Oh, the political spectrum. Okay, well, the political spectrum is. I mean, it's really hard to explain the political spectrum.
Well, it's okay, Brian. You've only got 30 seconds to do it.
So the Ulster plantation of 1600. So there's four, okay. So this is just to show how kind of odd it is from any perspective. There's 4 main parties, and 3 of them are branches of Sinn Féin. And then there's the Labour Party.
So, yeah.
So Fianna Fáil, who historically were the biggest party, they were De Valera's party, although they've taken a lot of beating in the last few elections. They're the smallest they've ever been in terms of number of seats. Typically, they're sort of seen as being sort of economically a bit more left-wing and socially a bit more conservative. So on issues like divorce and so on, they tended to be a bit more conservative.
Mm-hmm.
I think they did support the same-sex
Right.
marriage thing, but then so did the Conservatives here. Then there's Fine Gael, who are kind of the other way around, you know, kind of more economically conservative but socially more progressive. So they were the ones who kind of, for example, pushed for legalising divorce and so forth. And it was under a Fine Gael government that the referendum on same-sex marriage was called. But there's and then the other parties, so Sinn Féin are pro-repeal. I think the smaller parties like the Green Party and so on are as well. But there's lots of kind of individuals within parties who kind of go their own way. So within both Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil, there are people who are more socially conservative and more anti-repeal.
Right.
So it's I guess Labour will be more progressive.
Okay. So, just before we thank you then, I wonder, is there anywhere in particular that you would suggest viewers wanting to get a good sense of this or reading more about it, where would you point them to?
Oh God. I mean, I've been looking the last few days at the Irish newspapers. There's 3 kind of sort of broadsheet papers, the Irish Times, the Examiner and the Independent. And the Irish Times it's sort of like the Irish version of the Guardian, as it were. It's kind of perceived as being this kind of more progressive left-wing paper. Although something that occurred to me actually reading these papers, that because Ireland's population is so small, there aren't enough people to have a really partisan newspaper, because there aren't enough people of one particular persuasion to read it.
Sure.
So even the Irish Times has got kind of people pushing a very kind of conservative line in some kind of opinion pieces and that.
Right.
But they came out in their editorial 2 days ago urging people to vote yes.
Okay.
The Examiner came out. Well, it had opinion pieces on both sides actually. It didn't really come out one side or the other. And the Independent, their editorial yesterday urged people to respect the will of the people. So I was kind of sitting on the fence. So yeah, have a look at basically the websites of the newspapers. I think it's a good way of getting a sense of the debate.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well,
Excellent.
Brian, thank you so much for coming along.
Thank you.
And how do you think Arsenal are going to do this season, the coming season?
I'm of the view that all football should be banned. But
You heard it here first. Well, Arsenal are trying to outlaw football by playing some rather different game entirely.
The solidarity of the working classes.
They're starting by
Controversial
abolishing the defence.
Controversial. Cue the music.
Yay.
Cue the music.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much,
Thanks, Brian.
Megan. Sorry, Brian.
Wonderful. So, thank you to Brian, and just as an extra little thank you, Mark, I think we should name Brian's book J.L. Austin on language.
We should, and have.
Book of the week.
Yeah. J.L. Austin, obviously, philosopher with strong local roots, family from Lancaster.
But also with an interesting Palestine connection. His daughter Lucy is married to a Palestinian peace activist, Sari Nasebi, who came over here and gave the Richardson Institute peace lecture 2 years ago.
Wow.
Who is
Small world.
A very good friend of one of our very own PhD students, Mr. Adil Rushed.
Right.
Who is mentioned in Sari's book, which is on that shelf, Once Upon a Country, which in another week could very easily have been Book of the Week. So anyone who wants to know about life in Palestine and the day-to-day efforts of a
should
Palestinian
read
Jerusalem.
J.L. Austin on language.
Indeed.
Which is our Book of the Week. Anyway.
So Mark, lots to talk about. Let's
Where
crack
do you want
on.
to start?
Satellites.
Okay, satellites, and yes, well, now I know all about this. And Brexit.
So
Go on
Brexit
then.
update, Mark. Where are we at with Brexit?
Well, the situation, the government's negotiating position just seems to be completely in tatters, and infighting is now the big story. And Mr. Hammond and Mr. Gove were at the centre of attention. There's some disagreement about the House of Lords votes, whatever. Yeah, I mean, there's a sense that instead of the usual situation where you think there might be a lot of chaotic debate, but the government knows what it's doing, there's a lot of chaotic debate, and the government clearly is completely clueless about how to resolve the problem, particularly of the North-South Island, the border. And I think probably because there is such palpable disarray, I mean, it's one of these things that very often you get the inside story, and you do find that actually you thought the government knew what it was doing, but it didn't.
Yeah.
Whatever. In this case, I think it's pretty transparent, the chaos in the government, and the EU has realised that the government is in chaos, and so they are now twisting the knife in various, perhaps slightly unexpected quarters. So you obviously are more briefed on this than me, but things like denial that Britain can expect cooperation with certain long-established projects. I think most people thought that long-established projects would continue going because they didn't involve political decision-making.
Yeah.
They involved decisions taken long ago.
Long established.
Yeah, but no.
Well, apparently, the EU diplomats have said that the British position, the negotiating position, is fanciful, a pipe dream, and have said that, look, this isn't going to stand if Britain withdraws from the EU, which it is looking like it will be.
Well, no, the
doing
people have spoken.
In 9 months' time, it
Yeah.
will lose access to satellite networks. It will lose access to Galileo. And in response, Mr. Hammond has said we need to launch our own satellite network, which is
Well, I don't know, it's good
ambitious.
for the economy, and, you know, when we're independent, then, well, we can do whatever we want.
indeed. And
That's why
space
we
is,
voted for Brexit. I mean, this seems to me just a little bit over the top, mind you, so, but without knowing the real legal position about it, but cooperation, scientific cooperation in particular, seems to be in everyone's interest. It could be that the Galileo thing, it may be something where if Britain isolates itself in other respects, that the people in the EU could say, we're not going to suffer if you're not around.
Yeah.
Whereas scientific cooperation, you could say the British input is so important that the EU can't afford to lose Britain. But in this particular instance, it probably can. So
one would hope, given that we are sitting here doing this filming in a university. But Mark,
Yes.
in slightly happier news, two people got married over the
Oh,
weekend.
yeah. And we've already said how
And
much
it
the
was
programme
wonderful.
approved.
Did you watch it?
I watched a lot of it, actually. I watched it without really... I cringed, obviously, during the, the evangelical guys thing, just simply because he went on and on and on and on. If he'd have cut it, it would have been absolutely brilliant.
Oh, it was wonderful.
The trouble is,
yeah.
it was, you can have too much brilliance. And he admitted that he overran, he doubled the time. And you
Right.
could see, the funny thing is that Meghan Markle was... really enjoying it, and her smile did seem to be genuine rather than fixed all the way through. But Prince Harry was quite Harold was Henry indeed, yes. We call him Harold.
Okay.
But he was clearly fidgeting and thinking, "Oh, why doesn't he stop?" But yeah, no, I thought. I mean, well, the thing is that the ensemble, the cast of people, obviously there were some people who really oughtn't to be allowed within the precincts of Westminster Abbey, footballers, whatever. But quite a lot of the people who were there, you just had to think, and people have said it, but it's true, that gathering of people from the very diverse cast of characters, just utterly unthinkable before the death of Diana, really. In a place like Windsor, and in that kind of thing, and transfer it to Westminster Abbey. I mean, it's an amazing, I think, celebration of humanity.
Yeah, it was beautiful. And any thoughts on what she wore?
Fantastic, absolutely brilliant. Somebody said it looked like a sheet or something, but she deliberately, the thing is, she was able to, as my fashion, with my fashion head on, she was able to wear something plain and elegant because she is really striking, you know. Whereas I think the Diana thing, unfortunately, the dress kind of swamped the person a bit.
I think you've said a lot more than I was expecting you to, but wonderful.
No, I thought that was a brilliant, that again, we're positive about Meghan Markle, and that was
Very
another
much.
very, she was trying to say, I'm not the story here. What, the whole bit about Meghan Markle?
That was wonderful. But in other good, positive news, and we'll have a bit more because then we're going to get on to Mr. Trump and North Korea and goat rodeos. But in Colombia, there's an interesting set of political developments. There's an electoral process that is taking place with a socialist, left-wing minded...
And that's good news, is it?
...politician.
Is he bearded and from Islington?
Well, I've maybe been a little harsh in calling him a socialist, but he's certainly a left-wing firebrand, wanting to challenge the previously, I don't want to say embedded, but traditionally in power right-wing governments in Colombia. And what's interesting about Mr. Gustavo Petro is that he was a former gang member. He was a member of M19.
Right. So this is all good news.
Well,
in good news, a gangster is challenging...
former gang member.
Oh, he's seen the light now.
And what's interesting is that it shows the success of reconciliation. It shows how peace processes can work and bring people in from the margins of society, giving people a voice. And he's actually being he's very popular across Colombia. He's getting people out to vote. And there's a sense of hope and a sense of addressing social issues. And obviously, social issues are one of the main reasons why people have been forced to turn to groups like M19 in the past, because they've been unable to find work, they've been unable to actually express their views, their human agency, to get jobs, to get better levels of education, and as a consequence of all of these social ills, they've been forced to join groups like M19. But with this reconciliation and this peace deal, it's meant that individuals like Mr. Petro have been brought into the political spectrum, which is, I mean, he's certainly not without controversy, as his reign as mayor showed. He was the mayor of I can't remember the city, but he was a prominent mayor and was quite controversial there with his social agenda.
Yeah.
But I think it's a positive thing showing that reconciliation can work.
Okay, well, you know, in some respects, I think the programme would have to stress that this wonderful development in Colombia may have happened if this former gang member had started up a centre-right organisation, that a socialist movement is not necessarily good news in itself. No,
but I think it shows that there is a desire to speak to social issues and address the issues that lead to rising gang violence.
Okay, yeah,
and
good.
And why,
you know, if there are other regimes of a similar nature in South America, all of them would do brilliantly, and we feel uplifted that all of them will. It's a path towards happiness and.
Well, what's interesting in
harmony.
Brazil is the opposite has happened. That there is a populist movement on the centre right.
Well, there we go, and that's a really good development.
Well,
it's led by a former reformed.
This is maybe a conversation that we should have off air, Mark, given our friend and his involvement.
Oh God, yes, absolutely, yes. The person that you're aware of is yeah. Anyway,
yes.
so next, so that's cheerful news.
Bond.
Right, James Bond.
Thank you very much. Yes, there's a new Bond film coming out. Apparently, this is news. Daniel Craig has signed up for another Bond.
But this is news to you.
Well,
I don't care very much at all.
But it's on news
infinitesimal.
websites.
Right.
It's being reported. Daniel Craig has signed on alongside Danny Boyle.
Excellent.
Film
so
is made.
It'll be this one will be
news.
James Bond faces his toughest ever assignment, saving the NHS from the clutches of the hated James Hunt. James Hunt. He was a racing driver.
He was.
But everyone in the film is going to be called James.
Obviously, James.
Yeah. Good.
And that's a nice little segue into the NHS crisis and the amount that is required of every British household to save the NHS, which was in the news this week.
Right. They need to pay for the salary of Daniel Craig to come in as James Bond and rescue the NHS. Yeah, but again, I mean, that's just completely made up figures, isn't it? Back of an envelope figure. The real figure would be astronomically much higher. Was it something like taxes would have to be raised by 4% over 10 years or something? If that were the case, then the NHS would continue to be in crisis because of the demographic change.
Sure.
The real terms increase would be probably nothing.
Well, another cheery bit of news.
Yeah.
Let's go to the failure of an attempted peace process then, Mark.
Okay, some
North
bad
Korea.
news. Oh, right. No. This is all going swimmingly.
Do go on, please.
Well, what's happened is that, this is really interesting. The letter that Mr. Trump published.
So, hang on, before we get onto the letter, let's just say what's happened. So, there was supposed to be a summit in Singapore between the North, the South, and the United States.
Yeah.
Aimed at de-escalating the nuclear crisis, preventing the North from pushing further into getting a nuclear weapon, and potentially facilitating a rapprochement between North and South.
Yeah.
The US pulled out.
Yeah. That's great news.
The letter.
Yeah, well, Trump, I mean, it was really an absolute classic of what you don't do if you want to be... If the person who wrote that letter was applying to be a diplomat at the most junior level, then immediately the career prospects would be ended, because it's unstructured, it's it isn't diplomacy, it's emoting, isn't it?
Yeah.
And all these incredibly deliberately mixed messages. The thing is that it's the first draft of something that should have been, which wasn't going to be good anyway, but he sent the first draft of it without any, and there's even ungrammatical stuff or whatever. It just shows that this is a person who is in charge of the country's diplomacy.
And I don't think this as a good thing because
he isn't going to meet, Kim thing, little rocket man, and that's great, because what they're doing is they're conducting a bromance at a distance, or at least it's a one-sided bromance.
Right.
Because it's pretty clear. I mean, all the emoting was kind of how much he'd love to meet. And the reason why he'd love to meet is that he thinks it's like two strutting macho figures, one of whom has got a bigger arsenal than the other one.
Well, that's what he's alluding to, yeah.
Exactly. So the fact these people aren't going to meet is wonderful news for the planet. Hopefully what will happen is a resumption. The South Koreans have verified that the North has started to take some steps which at least show a real intention to, de-escalate the nuclear thing, and so that the less publicised meetings will continue while the world kind of is totally distracted by macho posturings by Mr. Trump.
Well, that's certainly a positive reading. I'm certainly an advocate of dialogue and dialogue.
Well, between the people at the top, usually, as you know, all meetings are decided before the meetings take place, and it's all done by officials. And in this particular instance, it's saving face, isn't it? It's what he's done is actually talked up little rocket man at home, because he's kind of said, I'd love to meet you. So the prestige of the North Korean, saying that kind of thing is giving Kim what he wants. He wants to be seen as somebody who the US president would love to meet. But at the same time with that, what that letter does is say, you've actually been really nasty to us, and so we're not going to meet with you. And that means he can play to his domestic audience and say, the US has pulled out of this because we've defied them.
Yep.
Yeah?
Well,
so it's all brilliant. I mean, it's completely accidental, but I would say it's all completely positive. Given that, what are the reasons why the North Koreans have come to the table, or at least tried to come to the table before Trump kicked it over? Almost certainly it's because China has forced them to. And that isn't going to change. The Chinese are not going to say, just because Mr. Trump's advisors are all bonkers, we now are very happy for you to go back to your nuclear program. They're not going to say that.
Well, I hope you're right.
Well, I am right. It's absolutely plain as a pikestaff. It could go wrong because we've got somebody who's rather strange in the White House, but I very much doubt it.
Well, call me a bit of a cynic, but I would much rather have a set of dialogues playing out formally and actually people working towards this. But hey, that's
well, otherwise he'd be out of a job, you see, because if he did a PhD course, a MA course on diplomacy, then, as I say, that letter is almost, well, it is without parallel in the history
Indeed.
of diplomatic disasters. And you would, if it was a student of yours, you would actually expel them from the university. You wouldn't just give them a fail, you would say, get out.
That's a bit of a Trumpism, sort of, you're fired.
Yeah, well, quite. Let's
Yeah.
pay him in his same coin.
Well,
I mean, it's I say unstructured, hysterical, contradictory, carefully choreographed by Mr. Bean.
Carefully done so.
But
Well, a couple of
the
things
realities aren't changed by that letter.
A couple of things on Trump, because again, we're running out of time.
Okay.
There are two things that have happened in the US this week that have been of particular note. There was the decision by the owners of NFL teams
Oh,
to say if any player kneels, then the team will be fined,
yeah.
which is surely in breach of one of the amendments, possibly the First Amendment with regard to
I would have thought so. Yeah.
freedom of
Absolutely.
expression,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
leads on nicely to the second point, in that Mr. Trump cannot use his Twitter account to block people,
Right.
because the Twitter account is seen to be a presidential account, and thus blocking people would be in breach of their own First Amendment rights.
Wow.
So, interesting stuff.
Very interesting for those who think that Twitter is interesting. Those who don't, like me, yeah.
Follow Mark at Dr.Mark Garnett.
And what else is it? Yeah, follow me. You won't get very far. What else? That's
Well,
it.
that's it.
Right,
Because of
fantastic. The
time,
packed
I
agenda.
fear.
Yeah.
We
Good.
are rapidly out of time. There are a couple of extra things that I wanted to talk about, but
Tides.
tides.
The tides of
Alexa.
time have gone out. Oh yeah, Alexa. Yeah. Anyway, never mind.
But maybe
Is that where
that's-
you say to the computer, do something, and it does the opposite? Whatever.
Well,
So,
I think this could be a much longer conversation, Mark, given your
but what you say,
expertise.
just for example, something like, get me the latest episode of the Impact Narrative,
Yes.
and episode 17 would immediately come up, starring
Indeed.
Brian Garvey.
Indeed. That's the theory.
That's Alexa, is it? Excellent.
In practice, however,
In practice, however, we have to now
it is
draw this.
somewhat different. But maybe
Oh,
that's
okay.
a conversation for next week.
Excellent. Well, I look forward to being enlightened.
So it's goodbye from me.
Yeah, and goodbye from Brian, and goodbye from our sponsors. And you can like us, dislike us, whatever,
Followers.
unfollow us.
And you can also see last week's...
Well, you can see 16 other
You can
episodes.
see 16 other episodes.
And
but
the
you can also
roundtable
see
on-
roundtables on
Yeah.
Syria
And
and Iran. All available at our YouTube channel.
near you.
Once again, thanks for watching. Thanks to Roz.
Yeah, and thanks to
Ramadan
Roz.
Kareem to all of our Muslim viewers.
Oh yes, and thanks to Alexa. Without whom?
And you have now triggered everyone's Alexa apps.
Wow, that's what it is. But another of my bucket list ticked off. Good
Good night.
afternoon. Good morning. Good afternoon.